kick off, Jerry, can we cue that video?
They want to fight too.
Well, you know, C-Trip, they've been going through this with Chunar, and I think their response was to basically go buy Chunar and invest in Elong. Is that a harbinger of things to come in India, do you think?
And the next.
Have many situations that could emerge. You know, at some point in time, everyone would contemplate and conjecture that there will be some consolidation that will happen. The way we look at it is, in many ways, there may be some consolidation organically happening at this point in time. If few players are aggressive, if the other players are not so aggressive. So some part of early consolidation, you know, in that sense is happening more organically than inorganically. And the inorganic, you know, potential consolidation is always more not in your control, more in the control of the, you know, the other side and the overall market dynamics. So.
So, something changed, right?
What changed?
You two are the ones to tell me. I mean,
well, I thought I did a great job being a US listed company.
Yeah.
You know, not to talk about anything that was brewing or whatever, right? But jokes apart, I guess the word consolidation was there, whether it is organically or inorganically. And I guess that was our thinking at that point in time as well, that maybe there is a room for some consolidation, whether it happens one way or the other. But I think the key word there was that there was some consolidation that was expected in the market, and that's pretty much what happened.
So could you walk us through the courtship that took place and ultimately what led you to swipe right on the M&A tender?
Oh, should I go? I think Deep has talked about it many a times. But it was, I think, exactly a year ago, back in Feb 2016, cold winter night. I'm actually narrating this episode exactly like the way Deep tells everyone. So Feb 2016, a very cold winter night. Delhi's temperature is almost 5 degrees Celsius. We're not used to it in this city. And we are at a farmhouse party, which means another 2 degrees gone.
Yeah.
And I happened to bump into Deep, and at that moment of time, we were also facing a common problem, which was a service tax issue, which I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about, which unjustifiably, you know, came upon us, which actually the case we won at the High Court. And we obviously got talking about that common issue. I think there was a common philosophy around it. And then we also enjoyed 2 good glasses of red wine. And that's what you know, got us talking about, that given that the Indian market is very underpenetrated, if we were to partner, we could really accelerate the penetration velocity and try and you know, orchestrate a larger market. And that's where the whole conversation began. And that led to me and Rajesh and Deep catching up in these very tier 3 hotel rooms, not the ginger rooms, not the ginger conference rooms, very, very shady ones. And, you know, we were basically...
Under false name bookings?
Actually, that was something which Rajesh used to always drive, right? And I'm sure he did so. But we would actually catch up in these rooms. And then after that, I made an introduction with our investors, which is Naspers. And Deep and Rajesh nominated a board person from their side. And then finally, you know, there were obviously negotiations. And then Deep and Rajesh actually then jumped into the ring to get the deal closed. And then in October 18th, right, if I'm not mistaken, Raj, October 18th, 2016, we made this announcement. And I think it's pretty exciting because it's been valuable for all constituents. And we hopefully feel that that would be the case in the long term too. And so that's really the absolute unbridged version that I've gone and told you.
And does the story remain the same from your perspective?
Yeah, no, pretty much. I mean, what Ashish told you is exactly the way it happened. Just additionally, maybe one more attempt that we had made before that, some time back, and it's actually we've always been. You see, Oliver Ripple, who's the Naspers, CEO for Asia Pacific. He was a board member on Flipkart, so I was like his colleague on Flipkart. So we would compare notes. And then one of our investors, and now we can talk about it, introduced us actually before this happened. This was like actually a second attempt. That happened, and then we had one call, Deep and I, with Amsterdam. And that didn't go anywhere. That was like maybe ahead of its time. That didn't really go anywhere. But the idea was, even at that point in time, to explore if there was any potential opportunity to work together strategically. So that was the only additional detail, but rest is exactly what Ashish just narrated to you. Yes, it was like a lot of time invested. I mean, these things don't happen overnight. And a lot of gory details about the negotiation bit, but I don't think we should bore anyone with that. But I think the key point where we all three were aligned, and of course, our board and Naspers were aligned, was fundamentally looking ahead, not necessarily looking behind, but looking ahead, what is that potentially we could do together? And that's where meeting our minds happened. And the rest, as they say, is history. And that's where we are focused on right now as well.
And if I may just take a little bit on that note, what really separated ibibo Group from, say, rest of the players in the market? Did you, at some point of time, when you were thinking of consolidation, what were the pros and cons of each of these players?
No, it's a great question. We started looking at it when we were competing really high. And from our point of view, by the way, that kind of strategy started when Ashish and team did a really good job in terms of disrupting the hotel market. And hotel market, as we all know, that we've been, MakeMyTrip has been trying to open up for years, back in 2007, 8 onwards. Because it was really underpenetrated. Flight market has moved online, but hotel market had actually not, despite all those efforts and investment and all, had not really moved on. And yes, with mobile ecosystem changing was one of the biggest drivers, but a lot of credit goes to Ashish and team to actually start and really go after it, disrupt the market and try to open the market. If there is one big advantage that we see, the amount of dollars that have gone behind it. First they started, and then we actually followed suit. In terms
and couple of others.
Sorry.
And couple of others.
And couple of others as well. So in terms of just making the same amount of investment, right? And that journey actually started when we raised money with C-Trip. That was actually beginning of this strategy, and that's how we said that we have to play, despite being listed company, we have to manage that, manage the investors, and have to convince them that this is the way to go, and that's how we started. And when we looked at, we obviously then competed fiercely, and that obviously overall opened the market as well, as we now look back. But in terms of players in the market, and then what did we look at differently? Multiple things actually. As we were watching them and looking them very, very closely, and as Ashish would tell you that he would absolutely watch us like on a minute-to-minute and an hour-to-hour basis, we started realizing that it was more than price, right? There was clearly some elements of technology on the supply side that they've done really, really well. And also, if you start looking at the complement, aspects of both the businesses, they have Redburst, which is like a, leader. Even, when they acquired, we were interested in that asset as well. So that was definitely distinct and different. And we thought that'll be really good in terms of us combining forces and that coming in. And we were the market leader on air, undisputed, but they were catching up on air as well. So, that would be great as well. In the hotel market, they had actually crossed in terms of volumes. In the domestic market, we had done actually a lot of investments in the international hotel market in terms of building multiple sources of, supply base, if you will. So, every core business, when we started looking at, we started realizing, and that's where actually, we kind of converged to this idea that it makes a lot of sense. Because it's not actually, which is a great thing, it is not a significant overlap. Yes, we are operating in the same market, and on the face of it, for everyone, it might look like that's just, the significant overlap. We realize even when we are doing the data crunching and learning more about the business, it is not. Even from a customer base standpoint, it is not, which is great news for us. So, there were many pieces like this that we saw that, that they would be different. And therefore, it makes more sense to get us together.
So a month since Competitive Commission of India approved the merger, what are the next steps in sense of integration, workforce, product, tech? How does that pan out going forward now?
Yeah, I think clearly we want to continue to build unique experiences on the brands, all the three brands actually, Go, ibibo, MakeMyTrip, and Red Bus. Each of these three brands have, again, unique consumer segments and its strengths and weaknesses. And we obviously want to push the strengths in and continue to build unique experiences and continue to focus on building the reach of these brands. I think that's pretty clear, and that's also visible amongst a lot of global travel players who have multiple brands operating in same regions or same markets. So I think that's the first thing. In terms of integration, there are certain pieces which we are looking at. The idea is not to try and do force integration, but the idea is to see, if there is knowledge sharing which can happen, which can lead to a lot of value in delivering value to the end consumers. I think the question we are asking is, whatever we do, what will deliver value to the end consumer?
Yeah.
So, does it make sense, for example, for us to share cache data for air? How does it deliver value to the consumers? So I think that's the worldview in which we are looking at, integration. And then, of course, there are some team members who get integrated. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rajesh. And some team members continue to focus on building their brands with which they work for.
So before you respond to that, how do you also integrate culture? Because at least over the last couple of years, both brands have been pretty much at loggerheads, and now them all coming in the same room. How do you change or make them realize that now you're truly unified?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess it is probably will be this particular question in the M&A scenario will be probably top one of the top two or three questions, right? As always, it's important. But when we got together, frankly, when we started looking at it, there's so much work that we saw that we need to do just from an execution standpoint. Culture integration was actually down the order, and we think that it is probably overhyped a little bit, and people overanalyze and spend a lot of time on your culture versus their culture kind of a thing. So we are actually playing that actually quite low key. And what we are trying to do fundamentally is that both the cultures, they were operating in whatever culture that they were operating. MakeMyTrip had their own culture and all of that. It was great, and we were operating with that culture in MakeMyTrip that worked for them. They were operating in that particular culture and the values that they were following. And then obviously there is actually in that area there is actually some material overlap there. So that worked for them. And we are not trying to fundamentally try to say that one should impose one's culture on other. What we are trying to actually do from an integration standpoint is more keep customer in the center and decide what we want to do. More keep business strategy in the center and then decide your execution roadmap behind it. And not necessarily, obviously talk to people over, we are doing all of that drill, by the way. This real work has started from the last, since the day this is, CCI actually approved the transaction. And keeping everybody, frankly, very focused on making sure that the rationale with which we have come together gets played out. And for that, we'll have to execute. Because, it's the rationale everybody understand. Market also gave thumbs up. You mentioned 3 billion market cap and the rest of it. But we are not necessarily saying that, yes, it's a feel good about it, but it's actually a lot of responsibility because a lot of the hope and potential is actually baked into it. And for that, we will have to execute. So as much focus as you can potentially, keep on execution is the way we are approaching.
And what are some of your early thoughts around keeping the brands distinct, differentiating their USPs to the consumer at least? Will that continue to remain the way it is, at least in the early days?
Yeah, I think, as I said, right, each brand has its unique strengths. In fact, if you scratch the surface, each of the brands also has unique consumer experience.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that as well.
Yeah, so I think, again, some of it would be evolutionary, right? Typically, both the companies have been used to constant experimentation and constant evolution, right? It's not overtly a deliberate strategy. It's a lot of learning by doing. And, whatever is out there right now in the market, right, from the 3 brands or the 2 brands, it already has some unique consumer experiences. It already has its unique strengths. And as a result, we will continue to, build that out. At the end of the day, how does a brand get created, right? Think about it. It's some creators come together and then they create. And that experience, you can't really always do a Control-C, Control-V. Yeah. And which is why we feel that those experiences, would be unique and, from a consumer mindshare perspective, at different contexts, these different brands would be used at different segments.
Just one second. Jerry, can we do something about those lights, please? All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
Chetan, we have a question from the floor.
And you.
To your right.
All right, there.
Hi, it's Paul from Trivago again. I wanted to ask about meta search because I work for Trivago, so I know that currently neither ibibo nor MakeMyTrip are present on meta search, at least not on Trivago, but it doesn't seem that you're live on TripAdvisor either, for instance. Can you give a little bit more insight? What is the strategy of your 2 companies for meta search in the coming months and years?
So, okay, why don't you go first?
Yeah, look, I think
the MakeMyTrip team is laughing in the back.
Yeah, because obviously we talk about these issues all the time. Yeah. My sense really is that we feel that on the mobile. So if you look at our businesses, they're typically mobile first. Almost 80% of hotel bookings happen on our native apps. And our air ticketing business is going that way, and so is bus ticketing business. The challenge that I see, again, what Rajesh said, every answer of ours has to be from the prism of end consumer experience. And the challenge that we are seeing today's date from a meta search point of view is that the experience of hopping from a mobile browsable experience or mobile native experience to another mobile native experience is not great. And we don't want to deliver that broken experience. Now, is PWA going to be the solution, or is there going to be tomorrow another kind of solution, is something which we need to think about. So that's really point 1, is how we think about. Point 2, the way we think about is that unlike a lot of markets where the travel ecosystem breathes on the food chain of Google, India, it's lesser so. Sorry, anyone from Google here. I think the nice thing is that that food chain is getting created in a slightly different manner. As a result, even if today's date I invest in a meta search, that doesn't become significant. That doesn't move too much of a needle. So I think these are my 2 views on meta search, and I think it has to have a food chain shift, which needs to happen for us to start really looking at meta searches very seriously. Raj, you may want to add some points.
Sure. Since MakeMyTrip team was laughing because, and by the way, this topic is discussed every alternative day. Okay, I guess that is why they were laughing, and probably day before yesterday also we discussed about this. I don't know many people know, we actually, before the deal, we invested in a meta search company called Ixigo. And Alok from Ixigo is right here in the audience as well. So it's not that, there is any kind of a, love-hate relationship there, and we just absolutely don't like meta space or anything of that sort. We actually invested long time back in Ixigo. I think what is important from business strategy standpoint is to keep looking at every model, every space, every kind of model. Even on, if you go down the TripAdvisor journey, you would see actually the lines are blurring there as well. Whether they, from Meta to Instabook to now actually doing bookings on their own site as well. So I think that space is also evolving, and we've been watching all this space historically, and we'll keep watching this space very, very carefully as well. And we've participated, and it's not that we've not participated in the past, and we will continue to keep looking at if there is value, like Ashish said, and we might have a point of view in India, with respect to India market, as well as with respect to mobile ecosystem, that how would it pan out. But that's part of the analysis, right, at the end of the day. In terms of, we would end up taking a decision in favor or not in favor of participating in Meta would be, frankly, a business decision which will evolve. So yesterday, I might not think that it was the right thing to do. In future, we may think it might be the right thing to do, and that's how we think about it. And we will continue to keep doing that, I guess.
So, spoke about you keeping an eye on what's out there. Looking at the rest of the market in terms of competition, where do you see the other Indian OTAs and also now increasingly Paytm, which has come like from behind the scenes?
Sure. The overall, if you look at the travel market, right, and we've always spoken about the competition in the past, but if you really look at in the past 3-4 years, there will be many new startups that would have actually come up and got funded. Clearly speaks volumes about the interest in the space, if you will. And I think that is coming from because if you look at the overall internet and e-commerce, this space is really liquid. This space is happening. People have moved online. And not necessarily, all of the players together in the marketplace, even today, have solved all the customer problems. So I think it'll continue to be there. I mean, we talk about hotel space and hotel space, as you know, it's really underpenetrated, but that's like organized hotel space. But then there is unorganized hotel space, and then there is alternative accommodation, and tomorrow there could be hostels and so on and so forth, right? So, that's how market is evolving, and I think there's a lot of interest is because of the overall kind of travel market size opportunity that they see, and therefore the competition will remain. Right, and the other, Yatra got listed on Nasdaq as well, and they've raised money, and there are other travel players who are raising money as well. So we would be watching the competition as we were watching all the time in the past. What we need to do is to, on one side, keep watching what's going on in the market, but more importantly, frankly, is to execute our own strategy. And then stay ahead because of that, right? Because we will have to, then this B2C space, I'm sure there is learning in the room as well for anyone who's kind of into the internet B2C space. There is learning every day. You have to evolve every day. There's constant innovation that you will have to keep doing, constant execution you'll have to keep doing. You can't take eyes off the ball, even for a day, forget like, weeks and months and stuff like that. So I think that's the real, kind of secret sauce, if you will. If somebody has to say stay ahead. Now, whether tomorrow it is, an international OTA, all of them are all here as well. And they get interested. Of course, they will get interested because, the market will be interesting for them to get in. And or horizontal like Paytm, because of whether they, before horizontal like Paytm, actually Just Dial also started to do something. So. The success of those kind of initiatives from the horizontal would be a function of we believe how much focus do they want to really give it to that kind of vertical. Building use cases is a completely different strategy. So you can build use cases which is easy for you to just bring in on board, give it to your users and so on and so forth. But if you really want to build a travel business, I think it's going to be a completely different ballgame.
So continuing on Paytm for a bit, around this time last year, Go ibibo was one of the launch partners on Paytm marketplace, right? But I don't think MakeMyTrip was. What is going to be the brand strategy going forward on marketplaces such as Paytm? Will you participate on it?
Yeah, I think firstly, we continue to be very experimental. We experiment to learn, and we did experiment with Paytm too, just like the way we've experimented with TripAdvisor, and similarly with many other meta searches and marketplaces. And my learning is at the end of the day, does this create value for the end consumer from a consumer experience point of view? If it's going to be broken, then it's going to be an issue. For example, my motivation to snap ties with Oyo was not because they were aggregating, but because they were not delivering a seamless user experience to our customers, right? So that's really the view. I think building consumer experiences is really hard. We undermine, right? As Rajesh rightly said, building a use case, putting content, and then putting a payment system and a checkout is easy. But building reliable consumer experiences, solving for when a person, the day he's checking in, and ensuring that he checks in and he's not kicked out of the lobby at 1 in the morning, and using technology to solve for it. There are thousands such use cases. If I sit today's date with you in a room, I will find it hard to even cover up, all the use cases. It's like a very, very complex thing. And it's constantly evolving with new use cases coming every day. So my view is that by just publishing something on a marketplace, which we do transactions, and there is no thought around consumer experiences and reliability and trust is a recipe for disaster. So we'll constantly experiment. We're not like this. We're not like closed to everything, but we will be. Everything is the center of everything is the consumer for us.
Yeah, the only additional point I would like to add here is, there's no rocket science, frankly, in this thought process. That if we see anyone is going to become a potential competition, you obviously would compete with them. You would not work with the competition unless any kind of an M&A strategy happens, that kind of stuff, right? And I think that's a very good yardstick to see. If it is just more a completely different strategy, but if someone wants to get into and say very seriously, I want to build a business vertical, which is travel business vertical, more than welcome for anyone to do it, because I think the market is big enough. But then there'll be a healthy competition, and we'll be competing with anyone who would be doing it. So I think that's also a very important one to kind of potentially look at it.
So in the light of the merger, many analysts compared MakeMyTrip to Ctrip, especially in the way the merger happened, and also with the string of historical acquisitions that you made. How much of that do you think is true? Is MakeMyTrip India's answer to Ctrip?
Well, the way we look at Ctrip, frankly, when we were looking at, like I said, that's how the whole kind of aggressive journey started, when we were trying to, make a strategic move in terms of just going extremely aggressive. And we thought Ctrip was the right partner for us, and very inspirational, frankly. Ctrip's story is not only now analysts are comparing. In fact, part of our IPO roadshow deck, the one slide was Ctrip and MakeMyTrip comparison as well. And distinctly remember that, and everyone used to see that, every investor, potential investor, and they used to love it and say, listen, okay, this might be very interesting story. And that's how we've been getting investment, etc. as well. And not because of that slide per se, but the way we've been executing it, right? Because at the end of the day, you will have to deliver, and then only people would stay interested. So I think Ctrip is a very, very inspirational story. But what was important from our point of view was, and we've been getting that strategic advice, our choice was a conscious choice because China had seen, China and India, lot more similarities if you really see from the ecosystem standpoint, mobile is it's a clear mobile dominated ecosystem there. India has moved on mobile significantly as well. If you look at the consumer behavior, in terms of just how would they like to plan and travel, etc., there are a lot of similarities. They like to travel in groups. People here like to travel in groups, etc., as well. Food habits, lot of things are common. And also the way the C-Trip organization and the overall evolvement happened, just right from when they started, the journey was quite interesting, one-stop shop. We kind of resonated quite well with our business model as well. And the fierce competition that they had seen, first with Elong and then with Chunar, etc. And they had been there, done that. They had actually also gone through uncannily, gone through the same cycle, being a listed company, trying to just balance their strategies, and then going overtly aggressive, losing share, going overtly aggressive, getting their share back, and so on and so forth, right? So I think there were a lot of strategic similarities that we saw. And clearly one of the things that we've been, and James has been on our board ever since, and been invaluable in terms of strategic advice that we've been getting, because everything that you actually speak about and discuss resonates really, really well with him, and he's a visionary actually. When you talk to him, you discuss with him. We had many round of discussions, more strategic, words of wisdom all the time.
So moving on to new segments, now under your stable you've got Ride, Ride Stay,
yep.
Both in distinct segments, transportation, peer-to-peer transportation, and peer-to-peer accommodation,
yep.
Serviced accommodation. What's the vision for these brands, and how do you make them stand out in light of existing brands that are already out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, so in the transportation space, we feel that, so actually both these categories are greenfield. And we'll have to do a lot of market making, almost similar kind of efforts that we did for the accommodation category. So if you look at transportation, intercity transportation, it is highly fragmented. Today's date in India, there are many cities and towns, Ballabgarh to Moradabad. There is no formal or standardized transportation which is connecting these two. There may not also be rail transport which is connecting. So this is like super greenfield, which we have launched already, and we've also integrated into the Go app. We will do so on the MakeMyTrip app too, which enables you to obviously rent a single journey or even share a car between two cities. The use case is between two cities. Yep. The use case is not within the city. And our feel is that nobody has solved this problem. Yes, there are cab operators being aggregated, but no one in the country has solved this problem. I hope now not too many competitors get up and start trying to solve the problem.
Alok, can I see somewhere?
But we feel pretty excited about this particular category. In the same light, in the alternate accommodation, we believe that the use case and the solution is very different from the way Airbnb's done it. And I mean, we obviously are pretty inspired by Airbnb, just like the way we continue to be inspired by Uber for its user experiences. Not Travis right now, by the way. But, we feel that, to build unique experiences to enable groups of people to be able to rent villas, accommodations, which they find it hard to do so with the hotel accommodation.
Jerry, I'm going to go slightly over with one last question. Now, founder and president of MakeMyTrip.
No, not founder.
Co-founder.
Co-founder
and president of MakeMyTrip. So what does your day job entail?
So what does my day entail? So
day job entail.
Day job, okay.
As a president.
Okay. Right now, I have a night job, actually. Day and night. Yeah, I think it's so the thing about this business is that it's not a job. The day it becomes a job,
Yeah.
you know, it'll become boring. I mean, I would have exited it if it were a job. I think this is, for someone like me, besides playing squash, this is a hobby. And hence, it's a day and night job.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ashish, Kashyap, Rajesh, Magow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.